Hey guys, we come to our next video in our series on how Jesus is present in the Old Testament long before he shows up in the flesh in the New Testament. We will be diving in the book of Judges. The book of Judges spans over a 325-year period where God places 12 deliverers who were both men and women in leadership from after the death of Joshua. One of the main verses we see repeated in this book is, "In those days, Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes." Without proper leadership, Israel would yet again become incredibly stubborn and continually follow and worship the wooden and golden false gods of the surrounding nations. And God would have to discipline them because they forgot that God called them out to be his chosen nation, to be a light to the world. The ways and beliefs of the surrounding nations would always be more attractive because people gave themselves into sexual liberalism, selfishness, and prostitution, which also was a form of worship, kind of the things we actually see today in society. They thought that they can fulfill their selfish and sexual desires whilst at the same time fulfill their religious duties. So God punished Israel for their disobedience. But it was only when God raised up leaders called judges, Israel would then sometimes flourish because these leaders were instructed by God and obeyed him, which always brings blessings. However, this would not always happen. Even when there was a judge in place, people would still not obey. When these judges would die, Israel would again fall back into disobedience until another judge was set in place. It is a stubbornly repetitive cycle over and over again. This cycle has 5 parts. Israel rebels against God. Israel is then overrun by enemy nations. Israel is then delivered by a God-fearing judge. Israel remains loyal to God under the judge. And Israel forgets God when the judge dies. One might ask, why doesn't God just do away with these people? Why does he even bother? It's a reasonable question, but God cannot ever lie. He is holy. God bound himself with an oath to their ancestor Abraham, saying that he will make them a great nation. God's patience is slow, which is good for us. His ways and thoughts are much more infinitely higher than ours. Okay, now there are 2 foreshadows of Jesus I want to show you, which are Jesus symbolized in the person of the judge and who was the angel of the Lord. Now we know the role of the judge was to execute God's orders on the nation, that it was to make sure Israel were to be following God's laws that he set out. The judges would make sure that there is order and makes judgments that are balanced correctly and is righteous in their dealings with issues. Because God is the ultimate judge, we need to understand who the person of Jesus is. I previously made a video on finding out who Jesus claimed to be. We conclude that Jesus claimed to be God himself, that ultimate judge who executes righteous judgments on a disobedient humanity. Luke the historian wrote, "He commanded us to preach to the people and to testify that he is the one whom God appointed as judge of the living and the dead. Also, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each of us may receive what is due us." So the role of the judge is actually personified in the person of Christ. Next, there is a great image we see of Christ in a celestial being called the angel of the Lord. The first time we see this being in this book is in the following verse. "Then the angel of the Lord came and sat beneath the great tree at Ophrah. The angel of the Lord appeared to him, Gideon, and said, 'Mighty hero, the Lord is with you.' When Gideon then offered a burnt offering to the angel of the Lord touched the meat and bread with the tip of the staff in his hand, and fire flamed up from the rock and consumed all he had brought, and the angel of the Lord disappeared. When Gideon realized that it was the angel of the Lord, he cried out, 'O sovereign Lord, I am doomed. I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face.' 'It is all right,' the Lord replied. 'Do not be afraid, you will not die.'" Gideon thought he was going to die because Israel knew that no one could see God's face and live. So Gideon thought that he just saw God's face. When we come to the New Testament, Jesus appears to unveil his true divine nature in front of Peter, James, and John, and they witnessed this for themselves in Matthew chapter 17, and they didn't die. There's another verse which is interesting to know. "Then Manoah inquired of the angel of the Lord, 'What is your name, so that we may honor you when your word comes true?' He replied, 'Why do you ask my name? It is beyond understanding,' or 'It's too wonderful.'" In Revelation it writes, "He has a name written on him that no one knows but he himself." So the angel of the Lord's name is unique. The prophet Isaiah actually referred to the Messiah's name, and he said, "He will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, King of Kings, and Lord of Lords." What name could be so much more greater than that? So it's possible that the appearances of the angel of the Lord was the pre-incarnate Christ, as this being never shows up in the New Testament when Christ is present. To watch some beautiful visual imagery of the explanation of who the angel of the Lord was, check out the Bible Project's video below. Now these are two major types and foreshadows of Christ we can see in the book of Judges. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please again like and subscribe, and until next time, take care. See ya.